You did everything right. You served, you transitioned, you got the job, maybe even a federal position, maybe a contracting role. From the outside, everything looked fine, and yet inside you felt completely lost. Like you're performing a version of yourself that didn't quite fit. Like you felt something was left behind that you couldn't name. If that's ever been you, this video is for you. Because what you're experiencing or have experienced is actually has a name behind it and research to back it up. And understanding that might just explain some patterns you're still carrying right now, even years after you've separated. Hi, I'm Lena, and this is Lena Makes Work Make Sense, where I break down workplace psychology using real experiences from the military, federal, and contracting careers. Today we're talking about military identity, veteran career transitions, and the 3 stages researchers say every separating service member goes through, whether you know it or not. Okay, the study I want to talk to you about today is by Becker and colleagues, published in 2023. And it looked at veterans from the Australian Defence Force, service members with no physical injuries, who still struggle deeply with their transitioning into civilian careers. Emphasize that there is no physical injuries, because so much of the conversation around veterans transitioning has to do with the visible wounds or disability ratings on things you can point your finger at and say, oh, that's why this is hard. But what about the people who look fine on paper, scored the job, passed the screening, and showed up ready, and still felt like something was deeply wrong? That's what this research is about. And here's a number that stopped me cold when I read it. 50% of veterans quit their first civilian job within 12 months. Not because they're not able to perform, but because culture shock. Because the environment they stepped into didn't match the identity that they had built over the years of service. As a student of industrial organizational psychology, that's the branch of psychology that studies people in the workplace. This research resonated on a personal level with me because I've lived it, and I've watched other women in federal careers and military adjacent roles live it too, often without any language for what was happening to them. The research found 3 distinct stages that veterans move through during transition. They called them realizing, relinquishing, and reconceptualizing. And I want to break down each one for you. Not in a textbook term, but in real life terms. Stage 1 is called realizing, and it's exactly what it sounds like. The moment or the slow accumulation of moments where you realize that the identity you carried in the military is no longer your default. In the military, the second you wake up, you have a rank, you have a unit, you have a role, and a mission. There is no ambiguity about your value or your place. You earned it, you wear it, and everyone around you understands what it means. That's not just a job, that's an identity framework that organizes your entire sense of self. Then you separate, and on day 1 of your civilian life, nobody calls you by your rank. Nobody knows what your AFSC or MOS means. Nobody understands that language you've spent years becoming fluent in. And the work that defines you, the mission that felt consequential, is replaced by a job description and a performance review cycle. The realizing stage is that disorientation. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, a meeting where you realize nobody operates with the same urgency as you're used to. A moment where someone questions a decision you would have made without hesitating in uniform. Small things add up to a feeling the you who existed in the military doesn't quite translate here. And that's the hard part. But most people don't have a language for it. So instead of processing it as an identity shift, they process it as a personal failure. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I'm the problem. All right, stage 2 is called relinquishing. And this is the one that nobody talks about enough because relinquishing means grieving. It means actually sitting with the loss of what you left behind. Not just the role, but the belonging, the camaraderie, the sense that what you were doing mattered to the people standing next to you and your families. And here's where I want to get personal with you, because this is my story too. When I transitioned, I was fortunate enough in some ways. My husband was still actively serving, so we were still living within a military community. I had that anchor, and I landed what felt like a great opportunity with the federal career as a civilian in a training position. So that felt like an alignment, like I was continuing to serve in a different way. And the training phase, I loved it. We were learning together, we were growing together. There was this shared purpose that felt familiar. It reminded me of what I'd always known, that group mentality. You bring everyone up together, nobody gets left behind with information or skill. But then training ended. Permanent assignments started and something shifted that I couldn't immediately name. The collaboration disappeared. The people who had felt like a team started operating like individuals, protecting their own lanes. And the camaraderie that I had been quietly rebuilding, gone. What the research describes as military identity is built on something really specific: group belonging and a shared mission. The military doesn't just train you to do a job, it trains you to see yourself as part of something larger than yourself. That's not just a culture, that's identity at a cellular level. And the civilian workplace, especially the federal government, often operates on the opposite principle: individual performance, individual advancement, individual credit. When you've been wired for collective purposes and you land in an individualistic environment, that disconnect can feel like a personal failure, when in reality it's a structural mismatch. So the relinquishing stage asks you to do something hard: let go, not of your values or of your skills, but of the expectations that your civilian workplace will replicate what the military gave you, and to grieve that fact that it won't. That grief is real. It deserves to be named. Stage 3 is called reconceptualizing, and this is where the research gets hopeful, because reconceptualizing isn't about erasing who you were in the military. It's about expanding who you are beyond it. It's the stage where you start asking different questions. Not how do I replace what I lost, but what did I actually build in service that I still carry? Not how do I become a civilian, but what does it mean to be me with this background in this new context? The skills you built in the military are real. The leadership under pressure, the ability to operate in ambiguity, the instinct to look out for people around you. Standard of excellence that most civilian workplaces can't even conceptualize. Those don't disappear when you take off the uniform, but they do need to be translated. And that translation is your work to do. Reconceptualizing also means allowing yourself to build a new professional identity that isn't dependent on the military for its legitimacy. And for high-achieving women especially, that can be the hardest part, because so much of our identity can be wrapped up in what we've accomplished, what we survived, what we've proven. So rebuilding that from scratch in an environment that doesn't speak our language takes courage. But it's possible, and the research says it's a stage, not a permanent state, which means if you're in it right now, you're not stuck. You're moving through something. All right, here's what I want you to hear before we move on. You didn't just serve, you were shaped by it. The discipline, the loyalty, the ability to lead under pressure and show up when it's hard. Those aren't military traits. Those are your traits. The uniform is gone, but the character refined is still yours. You carried something You carried something through that transition that most people in your new workplace will never fully understand. And that's not a liability. That's your edge. Give yourself credit for still being here, still growing, still figuring it out. That alone says everything about who you are. Many of us are still exhausted, and I want to tell you why, because this is where the transition story connects to something I talk about a lot on this channel, overfunctioning at work. What I've observed in my own experience and the woman I talk to is that veteran burnout and overfunctioning are often the same phenomenon, wearing different clothes. So when your identity was built around being dependable, being mission ready, being the person who doesn't drop the ball, and then you enter a civilian environment where that identity isn't recognized or rewarded in the same way. Many of us compensate by doing more. Why? Well, we may overfunction because unconsciously we're trying to recreate the sense of purpose and belonging we had. We take on extra work because being indispensable feels safer than feeling invisible. We carry tasks that aren't ours because that's what we were trained to do. Leave no one behind, cover the gap, and get the mission done. And it leads to workplace burnout. Not because you're weak, but because you're using performance as a substitute for identity, and that's not sustainable. I want to leave you with one question to sit with this week. Are you working this hard because the work requires it, or because your sense of self requires it? If this resonated with you, I want to know where you are. Drop it in the comments. Are you in the realizing stage, the relinquishing stage, or are you in the work of reconceptualizing? There's no right answer, just naming it as part of the process. So if you know someone, a veteran, a federal employee, a woman who served and is still trying to figure out where she belongs, then this video is for them. This is the kind of conversations that changes things when it reaches the right person. So if you would, subscribe. If you want more real world workload, subscribe if you want more real world workplace psychology that actually connects to the life you've lived. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.